All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. So one of the hottest topics in customer experience today, of course, is AI, right? It's being talked about everywhere. It's being integrated everywhere. So like on that topic, like how should we be deploying it into our workflows? How is this going to impact our products? So today we're going to bring you two perspectives. The first is deploying AI within your organizations. And then the second is the research, what we've been learning from some of the research that we've been doing on this topic. So my name is Dominic. I am the head of AI at UserTesting. So my job is really all about leading user testing through this AI transformation. Joining me today is my colleague and mentor for the last several years, Mike Mace. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi, been with user testing for about 10 years and been in the tech industry for my entire career. And one of the things that's been really interesting is watching how new technologies evolve and get deployed and how the industry's changed. And now AI is doing it again with another thing. And so I've been working on a study about how are people responding to it, what's going on, or maybe some lessons for companies. So I'm gonna share some stuff about that. You know, Mike, you've got a background specifically in multiple generations of AI within the tech industry. I think it'd be great if you could start off, give us a little perspective on that history.
Yeah, sure. So, as I talk about this in user testing, as I talk about this with other organizations, I'm finding that it is helpful for folks to understand like what that context is. So we all know we're in a big hype cycle right now with AI. I think what a lot of folks don't realize is that this is the second big hype cycle on AI in the last 10 years. So the first started in around 2015. Facebook, when it was still called Facebook, acquired a company called Wit.ai. And what Wit.ai is, it's an NLP engine, natural language processing engine. They integrated into their Messenger product, and about a year later, so this takes us to the spring of 2016, they told brands, you can start building AI-driven, bespoke brand experiences inside of Messenger. And then not long after that, Microsoft integrated the Lewis Intent Engine into Skype. And the backdrop to all of this was Alexa was proliferating in homes across America, Google Assistant, Apple Home. So conversational interface was a really big thing from about 2016 to about 2019. So really what had happened was all of these experiences, most of these experiences kind of died on the vine because they were not delivering value for customers. Really what was happening is they weren't meeting the expectations that people had. So, people's frame of reference around AI was a science fiction, right? And that's just not what these systems were capable of doing. So that brings us to November of 2022. Everything changes again. So what happens is OpenAI launches Transformer 3.5, that's ChatGPT. And this hype cycle that we're in right now was born, blossomed, proliferated, right? Like the adoption has been absolutely massive. So really what was happening in that first hype cycle is the technology wasn't quite ready for the moment. That technology wasn't ready to meet the expectations of users. And now, like I almost facetiously say that the moment isn't ready for this technology, right? Because it's just abstract. We're not really sure what to do with it, but we're seeing pockets of really strong value being driven by it. So Mike, you did a pretty extensive study on this recently. What can you tell us about what you learned about the current level of adoption on AI?
Glad to, and let me give credit where it's due. So it's me working with our research folks. So I don't want to take credit for all the advice and counseling that I got, but it's all of us working together. And the goal was to give you all a base of information about what's happening with AI that you could use within your companies. Something you could forward around, something you could use to engage senior execs. So information will be useful to you, but that will also be useful to your company. So we did a really big combination of survey with about 2,500 participants, and then also video self-interviews. So about 100 interviews of people talking about AI and stuff. So it was all about, are you using the AI chatbots? So that's stuff like ChatGPT. How do you feel about it? How does your company feel about it? And we focus specifically on knowledge workers. So those are people who use computers as a part of their work. So it was really use of AI within work, just trying to understand exactly what's happening and what is it going to mean for all of us. So we talked to knowledge workers, US, Canada, UK, Australia, and Singapore. And what we found is among those people, the market is already pretty much saturated. So about 2/3 of knowledge workers are using generative AI chatbots. most of the rest have thought about it and they've just decided it's not relevant to them. So basically we're done in terms of initial adoption. That is the fastest takeoff of any major tech product. For comparison, it took email about 20 years to get to that. Web browsing took about 6 years. So this has gone amazingly fast. And what we're dealing with now is the fact that we've gotten all of this adoption super fast, and then we're kind of going back and figuring, okay, great, we're all using it. What exactly are we trying to accomplish here and stuff like that? And so some of the coolest stuff in the study was digging into that, of understanding what's going to happen next and what do we need to do. The other thing we found is that ChatGPT is by far the dominant AI chatbot. I think we all would have assumed that, but it was really sobering to see out of all the people using it, about 80% have ChatGPT accounts. So it's really is almost the definition of what an AI chatbot is. So Michael, some of the stuff you're working on for user testing is, how do we use these bots within our business? And I'm interested in what your thoughts are on, like, how do we deal with this rapid adoption? What do we do about it?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think this really starts around recognizing what the value of AI is to, our organization, to your organization. And this is really about the massive rate of productivity that we could potentially achieve from this integration. I think we heard this morning, I think the stat was, 37% increase in productivity. We're seeing that again and again in a lot of these studies that are being run by knowledge workers integrating AI into their workflows. So that's I think where this starts, is like recognizing like what is the potential here? How is this going to transform our business? So what we've done at user testing is, we've really kind of keyed into understanding that and how this will impact our business. We've rolled out ChatGPT across user testing. We have an enterprise subscription to ChatGPT, and the reason for that is because it allows us to do this in a kind of safer way. We can use our data. Our data is not going to train that model. So that's something I know that a lot of companies are thinking about, right? Like, if I put my data in here, where's that data going to go? So I think the strong recommendation, I think what we're seeing a lot of organizations do is, purchase a enterprise subscription to whatever the model is that makes sense for your business. It could be OpenAI's ChatGPT, it could be Anthropic's Claude, it could be Gemini, it could be, Microsoft's product. But really, again, like, it's really just identifying what will work for your business. Early on, I think what you want to do is kind of, again, establish those usage guidelines. So these systems work best when you bring your data into them, right? They're going to start understanding more about your company, what your company can be doing. You gain greater productivity by integrating your data, but maybe you don't want to integrate all of that data in, right? So again, think about establishing, maybe it's an AI governance group, which is something we do at user testing. We rolled out AI usage guidelines, which tell our employees, like, here's a segment of data that we absolutely can't use. It's a small segment of data, right? But we can use everything else here. So really the only thing that user testing doesn't use is data that's owned by our customers. That's a very, very, we put very, very strong restrictions on that. But yeah, really from there, you just want to, I think the next kind of important thing to do here is to train your employees. What you don't want to do is turn this on, right? And just say like, hey, go find some interesting use cases and report back. There is very deliberate training that needs to go into doing this successfully. So this is not like any software that we've ever rolled out in our organizations. It's not like rolling out Salesforce. It's not like rolling out user testing, right? Where you basically give it to a group of people and say, here are the buttons and here are the levers. Here are the outputs when you push those buttons and pull those levers. AI works very, very differently, right? It could be very intimidating to look at like a blank text box and try to figure out, what am I doing here? Like, what am I trying to achieve? So find the individuals in your organization who are really leaning in, the individuals in your organization that may be already using this stuff. They could kind of become your ambassadors to help proliferate, usage, to help proliferate value within your organization. That's essentially what we're doing at user testing. So Mike, I want to switch gears here a little bit. So when you and I are talking about the survey results, you said that there were a couple surprises, right, in what you learned about AI usage in companies. So I think this, ties nicely into what we're talking about here. Can you talk about what those surprises were?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first one was, we asked a lot of questions. So there are probably about 60 questions in the survey. You'll be able to get access to all of that stuff. I want to just hone in on a couple of things. One is, a lot of the product management community has this test that they use to look at, are you getting traction with customers or not? And what you do is you ask them, how would you feel if I took the product away from you tomorrow and you could never use it again? And the choices are, I would feel very bad, I would feel somewhat bad, or I wouldn't feel bad at all. And what you're supposed to get is a successful product is supposed to have about 40% at least of the users saying, I would feel really bad if you took it away tomorrow. So we asked that question of users of generative AI chatbots within companies. And what we found is only 20% of them said they would feel really bad if it was taken away from them. The rest were a mix of, I'd be somewhat upset. And a lot of people, a larger number than that 20%, said I wouldn't care at all. So we were thinking, okay, so is this therefore potentially a failed category, right? Is it underperforming? Why is this going on? What's different about that 20% who are really into it? So in terms of their usage patterns, what the 20% are doing is that they're using the product very, very heavily as a personal assistant, a generalized personal assistant throughout their work. It's almost like you see those ads for hot sauce where they say, I put that stuff on everything. They're putting AI on everything, and they're figuring out aggressively how to use it throughout their work. They're changing their work patterns for it, and they're getting big increases in productivity. They're the ones who report that they're saving more than an hour a day on their work, which is a huge jump in productivity. Everybody else is treating AI as a casual thing that they use for occasional tasks. Maybe like, it helps me edit my emails before I send them out. But they're not generalizing the usage, and they're using it much less frequently. So the question is why? What's going on with these people? So we looked at the 20% who are really dedicated to using it. Are they early adopters? Nope, doesn't correlate actually, to my surprise. Are they people in a particular job role? No. Are they in a particular age group? No. Are they a particular gender? No. In a particular country? There's a little bit of linkage there, but really not enough to explain it. So we were really scratching our heads about this. And what we finally realized is the people who are the dedicated users are the ones who've been able to figure out on their own that they should use it as a generalized personal assistant. And nobody else is understanding that because, second big surprise, nobody's training them on this stuff. So another question we ask is, how much training did you get and who did the training for you? And the usual answer was, well, I went and watched some videos on YouTube, and that's about it. Or I talked to some friends. The percentage of people who are getting formal training from either their employer or from the chatbot vendors is really, really low. And so what you're seeing is there are some people who are capable of figuring this out on their own, and those are the 20%, and everybody else is not figuring it out, and as a result, they're not getting most of the benefits that they could potentially get. So that one has big implications for the companies who are building these bots around what they need to do to drive the next wave of adoption. It has big implications for all of us. If our companies are doing AI features, like making sure they understand how to do it, I think it even has implications back to those of us who are trying to democratize user research. Because actually, I'd say, Michael, you said, it's different, AI is different from like deploying UT. I'd say we sometimes see when we try to democratize cases where we've got a really powerful tool, people don't understand how to use it. So if you go to a non-researcher and you just hand them a UT and you don't do any enablement or training about how they're supposed to use it, chances are they're not going to be very successful. So I feel like what we're seeing with AI is a principle that's important to all of us as we're rolling out products. And it's that don't be naive about the ability of people to figure out how to use a powerful new technology. But it especially applies to AI because it's so powerful and it's so different.
Yeah,
I bring their current stuff.
I think that's a really good point. So one of the things I always talk about is like, this is change management, right? Like this is not just deploying simple software. This is absolutely like changing the way that we work. I think the democratization of research is a really good example of that, right? So that's been a big topic in UX research over the last several years. And the most effective programs that we see are not the ones that you don't give a designer, someone who's not trained in research, you don't give them a seat to user testing and think like, okay, great, like we've just amplified our customer insights, right? Like you train that person, like you put them on the guardrails of doing great or good enough research. And AI is not that different from that, right? Like you want to make sure that folks that are using it know what to do with it. And I think it's interesting, really what we're seeing at user testing is about a 65% weekly active user adoption rate. Like that's pretty high, right? Like that's especially compared to, I think what you were seeing in your study. And probably the testament to that is the fact that we're very deliberate about training our workforce on what to do with this. And one of the things I often talk about when it comes to training is, I think the immediate low-hanging fruit when it comes to using AI in a workplace setting is you want to start integrating it into workflows. Like it's definitely good at like, draft this email for me, or like respond to this email, write this blog post for me, create this piece of content for me. Like that's a very high value use case. I think the higher value use case is when we start using this as a thought partner, when we actually start integrating it into the strategy of the things that we're doing. Like you could be meeting with your boss next week, and you want to update your boss on, here are the things that we're accomplishing. Here are the things that, maybe I need a little bit more help with. Maybe you've got a deck that you're going to bring into that meeting. Put that through a language model and ask that language model, what questions is my boss going to ask me about this presentation that I'm about to give? Maybe you're the CEO of an organization and you have got a big board meeting next week, and you want to put your board deck through a language model. And then you can ask that, like, imagine yourself as the board of our organization. What am I going to get grilled on in this meeting? What do I need to be prepared for going into this meeting? I use it for those use cases all the time, and it's kind of transformed like a lot of these types of meetings that I have.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I'd love to also talk about the comparison that we did between AI chatbots. If we switch over toward that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You did a really interesting shootout with the different models.
So we did the survey, and that was one thing. And the other thing that we did was we wanted to test relative satisfaction of the leading AI chatbots. So this is ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Claude from Anthropic, and Copilot from Microsoft. So what we did is we gave those 4 chatbots the exact same prompts. We chose 3 different questions that we wanted to ask them. We gave them the exact same questions. We took the answers that they gave, and then we anonymized them. So we stripped out the branding, and then in our study, we said, okay, here's the question that we asked these 4 bots. Here are the 4 answers. Which ones do you like and why? How do you react to it? What's positive, what's negative? And then we forced them to stack rank to tell us which one they like best, second, third, fourth, etc. And so we got a lot back on like how they're judging it and what things are they keying off of and stuff like that. And it's one of those ones where you really want to watch the videos. We're going to make the videos available and you can see all this stuff. But the big aha out of this was that people treat and judge AI conversation the same way they judge conversation with a human being. And let me really emphasize that, okay? The same way you would judge a conversation between you and me is the way they are judging their conversations with these bots, which means that they key off on very subtle differences in word choice, in phrasing, in structure of the responses, and they have an emotional reaction to those things. So what we didn't get was an abstract analytical, I think this is the superior answer or something like that. What we got was, I really like this one. It flowed right. It came across to me well. It felt like it was for me. That one offended me. I felt like it was talking down to me, or it was being sarcastic. It was mocking me. We literally got this. It was mocking me. The bot was mocking me, and I don't like it. So strong, visceral, emotional reactions, because we are all wired to respond that way to conversations, right? And so we've got something that's tapping into human wiring in the ways that I guarantee the designers did not necessarily expect when they were working on this. So huge implications for if your company is doing one of those standardized bots, or even if you're just trying to add this sort of interactive features to a product. You've got to test not just for usability, you've got to test for likability. You've got to test for credibility. The cool thing is you could do that with our systems. It's easy to do, but it's a different type of research that nobody's used to doing. So one of the things I want you to take back to your companies, if you're working on AI stuff, you guys have to be doing a different type of testing around this stuff. It's really, really, really challenging for us to be thinking about that. Michael, advice to companies. on dealing with this stuff? What do you think the key things are?
So I think we talked a little bit about this earlier. So, first I think you need to choose a language model that you think is going to work best for your business. And there are a lot of options and there's subtle nuances and sometimes some bigger differences between those models. I think that's kind of the first thing. I'm not a spokesperson for, any of this, but I do think it's best when organizations have that enterprise license that gives them the freedom, the flexibility to use data with less concern, right? Like if you're in that enterprise environment, you don't have to worry about your data training the model. You don't have to worry about your data showing up in someone else's prompt, like outside of your company. So I think that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is to kind of identify pretty quickly, like what data are we comfortable with? What data are we not comfortable with? Every organization has a different version of this. I talked about UserTesting's version earlier where, we can't use any of our customer data inside that. That is a very, very hard restriction that we have. Otherwise, we're pretty flexible with the data that we use. We can put forecast models in there and start to build some strategy around the way that the models are interpreting that forecast. We can put sensitive product information that we're building inside of those models, and that helps us kind of like augment the way that we're thinking about building those products. So again, like figure out like what your version of that is. What I see a lot of companies doing is kind of creating like a tiger team, or like we have an AI governance group that is a cross-functional group. We've got representation from product, from security, from legal, senior leadership. So like these are the individuals who, like if you're early in your deployment, these are the individuals who are going to help you figure out like, here's how we're going to start. Like what is our ultimate goal in this thing? And then like figure out who your ambassadors are in your organizations. As this looks different from every organization, it's also going to look different for every different department within your organization. So try to find the people within each department in your organization that are going to help you really integrate it within that department. From there, it's just a matter of try to get folks using it, as a thought partner, collect the wins, share those wins, amplify and broadcast that across your organization. That's kind of how we've been able to get to about 65%, weekly adoption in user testing. It's really all about the training.
I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts on what are key takeaways for people within your organization. So if I was talking to your head of product, what would I say to them about the lessons out of this stuff? And I'd say, number one, if you're doing AI related stuff, you're adding AI features to your product, do not assume that the users are going to be able to figure out how they're supposed to use it. You need to take charge of educating them about how their workflows change, what are the insights that they're supposed to be getting from this, and what are the usage patterns. Just don't assume. I think the second one is you've got to optimize your AI products, if they're going to be interacting with people, for the emotional response that they're going to have. And you want to think about some things like, what do you want your company's voice to sound like? So if I'm doing something AI related that's going to be for Jack in the Box fast food restaurants, do I want the AI to sound like the Jack character that they have on the TV commercials? Do you want, slightly snarky and a little bit edgy and stuff like that? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe that would really turn people off and they don't want to deal with him, on a daily basis. You got to make very clear decisions about that. There's also a decision you need to make about, do you try for a single unified corporate voice, or do you have the bot customize itself to the individual, right? Because you might like a particular interaction, you might like a different interaction. Maybe the bot could be engineered to adapt itself to each of you, to your preferences, like it's a chameleon. Or it could be, no, I want it to represent the brand, I want it to come across the same way to everybody. You need to make a fundamental basic decision about that. Product teams are not usually used to doing these things. That's usually in the purview of the marketing organization. So you got some blurring and overlap here where they're going to need to talk to each other. And I would encourage the product folks to get out ahead of those conversations now, rather than getting surprised by problems about it later. The second one is for like a chief digital officer, somebody especially in a legacy company who's driving the overall tech transformation. They need to be thinking internally about, how do we change the workflows of people inside the company? Most companies looking at AI today have treated it first and foremost as a potential security breach. And so they focused on locking down usage of AI and training people on what not to do. But otherwise, and we got this in the interviews, we had people saying this, yeah, they told us don't do this, but otherwise it was like, yeah, do whatever you want, go ahead. Not the way to get productivity, because most of the employees are not going to figure it out. If if these really aggressive adopters are correct, what they're telling us is that they can save a day or more every week in terms of their workload. Massive increase in productivity. So if you're a company, don't you want to achieve that company-wide across all the employees? Wouldn't you want to push that proactively? Why in God's name are you just saying, go do whatever you want and just leaving it to them? You need to really drive adoption of this, because that may be a huge strategic advantage. Like get after that early and you may be able to beat your competitors. And what we're seeing from most companies today is they're not thinking about it that way. They're just thinking about it as it's a problem that they need to manage this deployment. And they need to start thinking about it as an opportunity that they should be driving really. The report's going to talk to all of that. So we're trying to structure it as something that you could forward around your company if you want to, share it up with management and stuff like that. So thanks for listening today.